All right, my good people, it is time to rank every Resident Evil game that I have ever played in me life. I felt like this would be a good time with Resident Evil 9 just releasing, and I finished that, did a full review of that. That's available on the channel as well. But I was like, yeah, this would probably be the best time to do a full series ranking for all the Resident Evil games that I've played. And Resident Evil is my favorite video game franchise of all time, and I've played the majority of the mainline entries, and I think I've played every mainline entry in franchise history. But yeah, I felt like, how about we go ahead and do some ranking and some rambling about some Resident Evil? And hit me in the comments down below with your personal ranking or your top 5, top 10. Keep in mind, this is just my personal, very subjective ranking of the franchise, but this tier maker list here was generated by user Ryan Petre, and they have it ordered where like the remakes are right next to the originals, which I actually really like that because I've never directly compared like going RE1 into RE1 remake and trying to compare and contrast. So I guess that's what we will do here today to formulate our ranking. But first up on the board, we have RE1 the OG. So RE1 the OG, of course, we got to put a lot of respect on its name because it laid the foundation for everything that we would get to follow RE1 in 1996. But I played through it in its entirety last year, and I really still enjoy this game a whole hell of a lot. And I understand as we get into comparing this to the remake, there are a lot of differences and a lot of improvements with the remake, and just the tone of the remake, darker, the more atmospheric, really leaning into the horror sensibilities more so than the original. But I love the color palette. I love the color usage in those original games, RE1, 2, and 3. They feel so distinctive. They really pop. And yeah, I mean, it's a foundational, such an important title. And I think we have to put some respect on the OG's name. So we'll put RE1 in the A tier. And I think for Resident Evil, I think I'm going to place both of them in the A tier. And I know some people might think I'm crazy for that. I know a lot of people hold Resident Evil 1 Remake in the highest regard possible, meaning like it is their favorite in franchise history. It's not quite that for me, but it is an undeniably excellent video game. And I really do enjoy seeing these games running back to back on screen here as we're doing this ranking. Just, you see the drastic difference in terms of the lighting, in terms of just trying to make a much darker, much more ominous overall presentation for Spencer Mansion, and no doubt including the Crimson Heads and the Trevor family backstory with Lisa Trevor, and just really going the extra mile to, at the time, this was like the pinnacle of what was possible with a remake. The remake culture really hadn't kicked off in a major way until RE1 Remake. And yeah, undeniably god tier video game. Visually, it is absolutely stunning. And yeah, so I think that both of them belong in the A tier. But I honestly, man, I think just for personal like appreciation, I'm gonna keep RE1 from 96 above the remake of Resident Evil 1. And it, to me, it's a combination of a couple different things. Obviously, once again, the appreciation factor, but it's not just that. Like, I really do enjoy some of the camp and silliness that you feel in Resident Evil 1. And I feel like the locations just feel a little bit more iconic in the original, opposed to the overly dark, foreboding kind of tone that they're trying to strike with the remake. If you wanted some objective ranking on this, then of course the remakes are the remake of Resident Evil 1 is a better game. But from a subjective standpoint, like, I do have more appreciation for RE1, the OG, and you'll see that a lot in my list. I really do love these original games. And so we'll kind of continue right off that. Resident Evil 2, the OG from 1998, is absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, an S tier game for me. And full transparency up front, Resident Evil 2 from 1998 is really the game that got me into gaming. There's a lot of bias associated with this pick, but or the placement, the ranking for Resident Evil 2, but I don't know. I think even removing that pre-existing bias, there is just an undeniable iconic status surrounding Resident Evil 2. You're talking about Leon, the first introduction of Leon in franchise history, who would become the biggest star for the franchise. I mean, even in 2026, you look at the sales for Resident Evil Requiem, you look at the sales for RE4 Remake, there's no doubt that Leon is playing a massive, massive role in the commercial success for Resident Evil, the franchise, moving forward. So they rely on Leon a lot. All of that started in 1998. Mr. X, the first like true stalker enemy, starts in 1998. You bring Claire into the mix. You bring Raccoon City into the mix. The RPD probably, I mean, you could say Spencer Mansion is the most iconic location in franchise history, but RPD is definitely number two. And yeah, man, there was a lot of technical advancement from the first game to the second, having more zombies on screen, and it's just going back to that idea of my love for the originals. It's just, there's something to the presentation for this thing. I think this game just looks so damn good. And I hate to repeat the same points that I made for RE1, but it is kind of that same, the color just pops. The lighting is so damn, it just hits in a different way for me than the remake. And not to disparage the remake, because the remake of RE2 is incredible, but something about that original just speaks to me on a totally different level. And I'm well aware that the majority of what speaks to me the most is the nostalgia, but there is also something about the fixed cameras, the tank controls, and not being able to see what's in front of you, but hearing it. And so that's playing into the horror so much more, of like anticipating the monster opposed to seeing it and trying to fight it, but just anticipating when it's going to pop out, what it's going to be, hearing the liquor make those noises before you see it. Just that shit hits totally different on the PlayStation 1, with those original games than the remakes, in my opinion. Does a lot of that have to do with the fact that I was young when I played it? Of course, but you can't really remove that bias from the ranking. So S tier for RE2, the OG, and I will put RE2, the remake, at the top of the A tier. I'll put it above both of the Resident Evil 1, both versions of Resident Evil 1. I think a lot of what you would say about Resident Evil 1, the remake, you could kind of just apply here to RE2. Much darker, like literally much darker, but I would say darker tonally as well. Like there is a less campy, that quality is still there to some degree, but it's definitely less campy. It feels more serious. It's a scarier game without a doubt, and a harder game. Both of those titles, RE1 remake and RE2 remake, are harder than the originals. They're more difficult to get through. And I appreciate that for sure. But whenever you're talking about the A and B scenarios and just some of the lacking content there, it's still an A tier game without a shadow of a doubt. And if I was going to introduce a new fan to this franchise, like if I was going to introduce someone who was 20 years old to a Resident Evil game, it would either be RE2 remake or RE4 remake for sure. Like somebody who was used to third person over the shoulder, like modernized shooters, you put them on RE2 remake or RE4 remake, and they're going to take to it like a fish to water. It's not going to be any complications or trying to understand mechanics. Like, you pick this game up and you start playing, and it just fits like a glove. It plays so damn well. The shooting is so clean. The limb dismemberment, it looks absolutely fantastic. Gory as all hell. And yeah, man, I adore. I don't know what the hell this person's shooting at on the trailer that we got rolling here, but I love RE2 the remake, and yeah, it would be A tier for me for sure. And now we move on to the Resident Evil 3 OG and remake combo here, starting with Nemesis, the OG. And this is an interesting one because a lot of people they attribute the over the top action direction that the franchise went into with Resident Evil 4 kicking that off. And in a lot of ways, you see that here with Resident Evil 3. RE3 kicked that off in a big way. And, I love the over the top action direction that the franchise would take into the 2000s, but I know people are kind of split on that. For me personally, Resident Evil 3, the OG, is just a tremendous game, man. The introduction of making choices in the franchise for the first time and having that, it just added that layer of replayability, making it so fun to go back to and see different paths. And I'm not saying they changed drastically, but there were changes that you could see on revisits. And a lot of people will call this like RE 2.5, and sure, there's a reusage of assets to a large degree for a lot of what you're seeing in the game, but I don't know. I thought expanding Raccoon City out and being able to explore the streets more, there was a novelty factor there for RE3 the OG. And yeah, I thought Nemesis, bringing Nemesis in, of course, once again, you do look at Mr. X and then you look at Nemesis, and there's a lot of similarities there with the design of the characters, the stalker enemy style approach. And, I thought that it just felt more dynamic though in RE3 the OG compared to the remake, where Nemesis felt very scripted and structured in the remake, and there was just a little bit more dynamism going into the design of Nemesis, where it did kind of feel once again akin to Mr. X, where at any given time that motherfucker could pop out and you're always uncomfortable with Nemesis looming. And sure, was some of that scripted as well and less dynamic than we really think, of course, but at the same time, it gave you more of that sense of immediate danger around every corner, because you didn't really feel like you knew when Nemesis was going to pop out in the original. So I give it credit there. I give it credit for the clock tower, for the park, all of the sections that were cut in the remake, which were, the clock tower is so damn iconic. Yeah, I would definitely rank OG higher than the remake, but I'm not a remake hater either. I think something that Resident Evil 3, the remake, doesn't get enough credit for is just the fact that it is a very well written, well acted story. And I'm a sucker for Resident Evil lore. I've watched all of the, animated movies. I've watched all of the bad live action movies with Mila Jokovic, and I'm a sucker for this lore. I can sit there and listen to lore breakdowns for hours on YouTube, and it's just something that I've had investment in since I was a child. So of course there's some level of connection there with it being like the first game I really got into. But at the same time, if we're being honest, this isn't a franchise that is just jam-packed with great storytelling. And I do think Resident Evil 3, the remake, there are some major improvements to the story here compared to the original that make it hit much harder. And you started seeing the budget. You could start feeling the budget with the motion capture and just the level of voice acting that we were getting in RE3, the remake. So I would place it pretty high, because if we're talking, I mean, RE3 OG, I do think is an A tier game. But I maybe I'm crazy, but I think RE3 Remake is a B tier game. Like, I don't think RE3 Remake is a bad game at all. If you just look at it, if you were somebody coming to Resident Evil 3 for the first time ever, never played the original, I think you would love that game. Are there some kind of cheesy boss fights? And there's problems with it, no doubt. But it's just a really fun third-person shooter with horror-adjacent elements attached to it. And yeah, I like the story for Resident Evil 3 Remake a hell of a lot. So I'll give it some credit there. Maybe it doesn't deserve B tier objectively, but for me, I enjoyed the hell out of the game. And when it came out, too, there was just an extra layer of spooky attached to it because I remember playing this and COVID, like the news all over the place, like COVID had just really kicked off in full swing, and you were starting to see the headlines running and people wearing the masks and the separation and the like. All it was all over the news, and then Resident Evil 3 kicks off with a lot of those same themes. And you're like, oh shit! I just remember playing that remake for the first time, and being like, oh damn, this feels very. The timing is wild with this. Next up, we got the old Code Veronica to rank and discuss here. I think Code Veronica is criminally slept on. Like, this is a must play title in the franchise, in my opinion. And it's also like a true swan song to the tank controls. And I know they would go on to do Remake and Zero, but Code Veronica just it felt like it kept that true identity of the tank based structure from the fifth generation and then took it into the sixth generation, and it was like the most impressive technical feat we had seen for the tank controls at that time, and just the double Uzis and how damn good it felt to shoot the double Uzis, and the sound effects and the art direction and the expansive nature of Code Veronica, like the different locations that you're seeing, totally different environments that you're getting to explore in this game that are extremely unique. And to me, the storytelling in Code Veronica is listen, no doubt with Steve, it can get a little bit campy and over the top. And I hope that when they remake it, that a lot of that shit is cleaned up to give it the serious tone that I think it deserves. Like, this is a very, very dark story with incredibly dark villains and villain arcs that you're exploring with the Ashford family. And it's like essential lore for, Chris and Wesker and Claire, and like these iconic characters are getting real proper treatment in Code Veronica. I'm really excited for people to, because I don't think that this is a game that, undeniably, this is a game that if you were to boot it up today and you had never played it before, there are things about it that will just frustrate you. There will be moments in this game where you forget an item and then you get to the end of the game and you're just kind of shit out of luck. And there's just things that are going to be cleaned up with the remake that I'm so curious to hear what people have to say about this title, because I think it's going to launch in 2027. At least that's the rumor right now, is that Code Veronica is going to launch in 2027. So I'm just so curious to hear what people have to say about it today, because back then, like, it's probably the hardest game. Code Veronica is probably the hardest game in franchise history, to the point where, like, even after playing the game multiple times in my life, every time I go back to it, I'm still shocked by just how damn hard this thing can get in certain instances. So yeah, with all of the modern technology and cleaning shit up and hopefully improving some of the storytelling, and just not even necessarily improving, just fleshing stuff out and giving you that cinematic feel that you expect from the modern Resident Evil remakes into a game that I do think has excellent lore. I'm not saying, once again, the direct storytelling can be a little bit cheesy, but there's really good bits of lore in Code Veronica that I'm excited for new people to experience, people who have like just started becoming big fans of the franchise with RE7 or RE2 remake, whatever game got a lot of people in the door. So I will place Code Veronica. Man, I mean, I think it's an A tier game as well. We need to order this A tier here a little bit, because I would put RE3, the OG, above RE1 Remake and RE1 OG. Would I put Code Veronica above RE1 Remake? There's no doubt that Code Veronica is much rougher around the edges, but I think personally I do like Code Veronica more than RE1 Remake. I'm not the RE1 Remake super fan that a lot of other people are. And I respect it and understand why, but it doesn't quite hit on that level for me personally. But next up, we got Resident Evil Zero. And this is one that I am probably a lot hotter on than most people. Um, a lot of the things that seem to bother most people are what I enjoy most about the game. I thought it was so impressive, the technology of having the two characters swapping between them simultaneously, having no item boxes, and having like the dynamic item drop where you could drop the item in game and it would stay there and you'd have to come back and pick it up, and on the fly you'd have to be like, okay, well, I need to go out into the field as Billy, go and retrieve some healing properties, bring them back to Rebecca. That way that she can, she can be good to go. And but to do that, I might have to drop a knife or I might have to drop a weapon and come back and pick it up later and have to remember all of that or jot down where you dropped the weapon so that you could pick up the green herb or the first aid spray or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I don't know, that stuff really landed with me and added that strategic layer to it that it was just fresh. When I played it, that was the first time that anything like that had been done for Resident Evil. And does it kind of feel like it should have been a co-op game to some degree, I guess, but we'll get to that in a second when we talk about Outbreak. But I don't know, man. I thought the train section was awesome. I think there's some really cool boss fights. The one area that it disappoints for Resident Evil Zero would be the lore. For an origin story, I think your expectations are a little bit higher than what you end up getting here in Resident Evil Zero. It's just the storytelling isn't that great. It's not like this super important game to play in the franchise to understand how Umbrella forms and then the founders begin separating, and like it's a story about James Marcus more so than the other founders, are more so about the operation of building Umbrella to become what it became. But I don't know, it's not, I'm not saying it's the worst story in franchise history, but it's just fairly forgettable. I don't even really think of this as like it is definitely a mainline entry, but I don't even really think about it as such. So yeah, RE0, really dope ideas, innovative gameplay, but not doing much with the story. And the actual main villain was yeah, not compelling at all. So we will drop RE0. I think I would go B tier, but I would place it. Yeah, actually, I think I would probably go below RE3, the remake. And there's not a lot of Resident Evil games for me personally. Like, once again, I'm a major fan of the franchise. All of the worst games, I just kind of avoided. Like, I knew they would be bad, so I avoided them. Stuff like, when we get to RE-verse, Resistance, Umbrella Corp, like I didn't play any of that shit. I knew that multiplayer Call of Duty clone wannabe shit, the more focused on the first person shooter or third person shooter multiplayer, that style of, like, that's not what I'm really looking to Resident Evil for. But I don't really think the main franchise has had many god awful games. We'll get to one in a bit, but not many at all. Next up on the board, we have Resident Evil 4, the remake. Or, well, not the remake, I guess. The HD version is the trailer that I'm running here for you, but this is, considering the original, the OG from 2005, or you can throw the PS3, PS4 version in there as well if you want to, the Wii version, all the different versions. Resident Evil 4 has been on 1,000 different consoles, but really talking about the OG in 2005, because I think that that's the context needed to really assess this game, or look at this game, analyze this game in the proper context, because when it came out, there was nothing that had ever been done like this. Like, that version of over the shoulder, third person, right behind Leon's back, like that perspective was iconic. It was revolutionary at the time. It changed the third person shooter genre forever, still to this day. And yeah, so that can't be understated whatsoever. And it can't be understated just how rock solid of a video game this is. And 100% understand the criticism of it leaning too much into the over the top action, and a lot of people throw that criticism towards like Resident Evil 5 and 6. You absolutely saw that really began with RE4 in '05. Well, you could say it began with RE3 in 1999, but RE4 took it to the next level. And like, I think that was just the series needed that at this point. I don't think going down that traditional the tank based route, I don't think that was going to pay off for Capcom, as well as like this was the direction that the franchise needed to take at that time. And the over the top action, I mean, this section here in the village is one of the most badass openings to any video game ever. And then you go into, I mean, you're talking about the Krauser fight, you're talking about the El Gigante fight, and it's just littered. I don't really think there's a moment of Resident Evil 4, the OG or the remake, we can talk about either of them here, that like those games are perfect candidates for replays because it's paced expertly. I like every section just as much as the last, going from the village to the castle. Like, just so damn good. Every minute of this game is so rock solid. And yeah, dude, I undeniably, both of these games are S tier in my opinion. So we'll go ahead and move both of them up, but I got to place one ahead of the other. And so here's the thing for Resident Evil 4. The impact that the original had is like, it can't be understated. But if you're asking me which game I would rather play right now, that's the difference between like Resident Evil 2 remake and the original. They're so drastically different to the point where their design just is completely polar opposite. One is a tank based fixed camera PlayStation 1. Like, there's really no remnants of that remaining in the remake at all. Whereas RE4, the remake, just feels like the perfect way to play the original game. Rather you're talking about the weapon swapping instantaneously, or you're talking about the being able to parry with your knife, or the additional lore for Luis, or I think Salazar's boss fight is better. I just think this game, obviously being able to move and aim simultaneously, like that is an absolute game changer. Some of the story bits I think are better, and maybe it is a little bit less campy. Once again, I think you can use that criticism for all of the remakes when compared to the OGs. That they go for a more serious tone, try to keep it a little bit darker. But I think this is the perfect balance. Whereas maybe the other remakes overcorrected a bit too much. Like, there's still a lot of camp in RE4, the remake. And just the Ashley redesign is so impeccable. Not having to really, you still have to worry about her to some degree, but not having that hand-holdy fucking escort mission style design being prevalent throughout the entire game. Like, that is so crucial to just the overall enjoyment factor. Like, every time that I boot back into this game, this is one of the only games I've ever played in my life where I finished it, and the second I finished it, I just restarted from scratch, just ran through another replay, not trying to unlock achievements, not trying to go through it on insane difficulty, or just wanted to replay the entire thing again. And to me, that is like the pinnacle of game design, because I'm not someone who really likes to replay games to that degree. So listen, if I'm just talking about my personal preference here, which I guess is what this entire video is, RE4, the remake, would be above RE4, the OG. I think RE4, the remake, is legitimately one of the greatest games ever made, bar none. But if we're looking at this and trying to assess impact or like objective rankings, I can understand looking at RE4 OG and being like, dude, it changed the industry forever. RE4 Remake really didn't do anything like that other than made an already iconic game, an already all-time great game, even just a smidge better. But still, at the end of the day, it is a smidge better in my opinion, so it will rank a little bit higher. But are you ready for the only game in Resident Evil mainline history that I have not finished? Resident Evil 5. I do not know. Like, I can't even tell you on any sort of factual, like, I don't have the stats or the information as to why this game doesn't click with me. And I've tried so many times to get RE5 to click with me, but it just doesn't, man. And to be fair to RE5, I played through RE6 entirely in co-op. The entirety of that playthrough I played with a buddy. And I don't know why we didn't play through RE5 together, because like we were definitely we had been friends long before RE5 came out, and we played RE6 together, but not 5. Like, I have no idea why we skipped the RE5 campaign together, but I played it alone, and every time I've played this game, I've played it alone. And everyone tells me, like, you cannot play this alone. It is the perfect co-op game, but it is not good as like a single player Resident Evil entry. And I definitely agree with that. Like, I do not enjoy this game whatsoever, but I will give major props to the lore and the storytelling. And when you talk about like those Metal Gear Solid 4, the crescendo moments, everything leading up to one game, RE5 definitely feels like that. RE6 does as well, in my opinion. The writing is horrendous in RE6. We'll get into RE6, but the spectacle of RE5 and RE6 are equivalent, or RE6 might even be more of a spectacle, but the actual character arcs that have been, you've been building to these moments from 1996 with a lot of these characters. RE5 really feels like it is trying to be that culmination point for the franchise, and I appreciate that. But good Lord, I just do not, for whatever reason, I do not click with this game at all. And maybe it was that thing of, when we're talking about the over the top action and leaning a little bit too much into that, maybe that's what it is with Resident Evil 5 for me. It was like, that was my breaking point of being like, okay, this is way too much action. And as a single player experience, it's maybe just not as enjoyable. But to be fair, like, I don't really think that's the reasoning either. I don't know why this game doesn't click with me. Because I like the over the top action. As we'll go ahead and move into Resident Evil 6. I actually kind of enjoy that shit in RE6. But let's go ahead and place RE5 on the board. I'll throw it in the C tier. It's one I don't even feel really comfortable ranking because I haven't finished it. Obviously, I've seen all of the story bits, and I've played I might have played more of RE5 than I've played of even games that I have ranked above it. Just all the amount of times I've tried, jumping back into it and getting through it. And I can't, man. But let's go ahead and move straight into, well, I was going to say RE6, but we'll hit Revelations. We'll do it in the order that it's laid out here. So Revelations 1, I actually played through in its entirety 3 years ago, something like that. And I like this game. I like it a good deal. I like the ship setting, and you would think that it would really not allow for a lot of level design variety, because you're talking about primarily the entire game taking place on a cruise ship. Although you are swapping perspectives between different people throughout the game, and getting to see a little bit more than just the cruise ship, and it expands a little bit beyond that. And just it's much better designed than you would think of. You would think of a cruise ship. Obviously, cruise ships are huge, but you're not thinking of this level of variety that you do get in Revelations 1. And yeah, there's some things about this game that don't click with me at all. Like, I think that final boss fight is just so damn tedious, so monotonous. But I played through it on the PS4 version, or I think I played it on Xbox actually, so the Xbox One version, and this thing feels great to play. The moving and the shooting, being able to do that for the first time simultaneous. Well, technically, I think Resident Evil 6, once again, give more praise to Resident Evil 6. I think RE6 was technically the first game that you were able to move and shoot, because if I'm not mistaken, this came out for the 3DS, and then it was, yeah, I think it was 3DS first, and then RE6 comes out in 2012, and then Revelations 1 releases after that on consoles. If I might be incorrect on that, but I think that's right. But yeah, man, it was obviously nice to return to Jill Valentine, a very different version of Jill Valentine, but it was nice to have the return of Jill Valentine and get it's not like an all-time story in franchise history, but just to have more main character lore that we're building into. And um it's for every positive I can think of a negative, though, unfortunately. Like, I hated the scanner. I just thought that was a completely unnecessary addition to this game. But there's some cool shit. Like, there's some chase scene, or not necessarily chase scenes, but there's these boss fights where you're having to flee and get out of the way and run and take cover, and it gives you that sense of real danger looming. And it felt like it did a good job of bridging the gap after we got so much action from RE5. This felt like a good return to form for like real survival horror, while also keeping those action-packed elements intact, and just the right sample size of each, though. So yeah, I like Revelations 1. Where does it rank, though? That is thy question, and I'll try to speed this up. I didn't notice I'm already 40 minutes into this damn ranking. Revelations 1 for me, I would probably place in. I mean, I would go above 5 without a doubt. I would go above 0. I would go above 3 Remake, but I do think it would be in the B tier. I don't think it's quite A tier range for me, but it would be in the B tier above 3 Remake, I think. Yeah, I'd go above 3 Remake. And next up on the board, we have the old Resident Evil 6. And listen, I understand. I'm probably going to get some smoke for this, but I'm a Resident Evil 6 apologist. Like I said, with RE5, I didn't play that in co-op. If I did play it in co-op, I would probably be an apologist for that as well. But I went back and replayed Resident Evil 6 like 3-4 years ago, and I had a good time with it. Like, I played through the entirety of it. Do I wish that some of those characters and their sections were cut entirely or replaced with characters that actually matter to the backstory of this franchise? Sure, of course. But I don't know, man. Like, I think that that's probably the key argument, right? Where it's just a mess in terms of pacing, in terms of following any coherent through line. It is tough, man, because there's all of these like world ending, high stakes, just these massive calamities that are around every corner, and you get distracted. And I guess I can say this because it's literally in the trailer. Capcom spoiled it before we even got to play it, but you get distracted that this is the first time Chris and Leon are meeting in the history of the franchise. And like, that is fucking huge. The two, marquee dudes for the franchise are connecting for the first time in game history. And that's just kind of a footnote. Like, that's not even a key moment or a key thing to latch onto in the game, because there are so many other high stakes moments. And to be fair, you can look at that as a negative, and by and large that is a negative. It no doubt hurts the pacing and the storytelling of this game, but This game is also batshit crazy, like Expendables level blockbuster, just very sticky action movie. You go to the theater, you get the popcorn, you get the Sour Patch Kids. You don't really retain any information, but you see some dope ass shit. There's some dope ass shit that takes place in Resident Evil 6. But, I understand that it's like anything else, right? If you play a bad game with a good friend and you're laughing and having fun and enjoying and dicking around, you're going to enjoy the game more. So that's why I give more kudos to RE6 than I do RE5. But at the same time, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, this is the first game that you could move and shoot simultaneously. That's a big deal. And sure, it should have been there for RE5. Probably other games were doing that at the time. Resident Evil, although they invented the this mold of third person shooter, they were already getting lapped by this point from other developers out there who had figured out movement and shooting at the same time and had figured out cover shooting, and like these things were already being done. But I do think that when you look at things like that, the technical improvements, this thing looked really damn good when it released. Like it was very impressive on a technical level. And when you look at like Leon's campaign or Ada's campaign, and sure, Ada's story a little bit batshit, but when you look at Leon or Ada's campaign, they're both fun horror campaigns to play through. And even if you just cut everything else from the game, you have like a damn near complete video game with just those two campaigns alone. You know what I mean? Like it's a big, big ass game. And if you're looking to just jump into something and get a lot of bang for your buck, this is probably the most bang for your buck you can ever get in Resident Evil history. And here I go defending it way too hard, but that's my case for Resident Evil 6. So listen, I will go. I mean, I'm not going to be crazy and put this. I'm going to go C tier as well, but I'm going to place it above RE5. Hey, you can't help circumstance, right? Like it just happened to be that I played RE5 alone and I played RE6 in co-op. Would things change drastically if that weren't the case? Probably, but I can't help that, man. So yeah, RE6 just ahead of RE5. And next up, we go into Resident Evil Revelations 2. And this is really I know a lot of people attribute RE7 as the true return to form for the franchise, but I mean, you got to give credit where it's due. That was Revelations 2, in my opinion. I think you see a lot of what made RE2 the remake great inside of Revelations 2, and returning to getting Barry back in the game, getting to play as Barry, so damn iconic. Good character building here as well with main characters Claire and Barry and Wesker, and they have some big character moments, some strong boss fights in this title as well for like a smaller budget spin-off. Like it feels bigger budget than like when you compare it to Revelations 1. Of course, there's the limitations there for the hardware it was initially developed for, but for Revelations 2, you see like the prison section here. The prison section is so haunting, so terrifying. This is one of the scarier Resident Evil games, like really, really strong sound design. It does have co-op functionality as well, and you play a little bit more over the top action as Barry, and then like it's a little bit unbalanced for sure. Like I could understand the complaint of playing as Moira or Sherry, and you're limited in terms of what you're doing in game. But at the same time, like it's cool to just have a traditional real Resident Evil game that you can play in co-op. Like that is a novelty. There are not many, when you look at RE5 and RE6, not to say they're not real Resident Evil games. Like who am I to say what real Resident Evil is? But like returning to actual survival horror and doing that in co-op outside of Outbreak, that's not really a thing. So yeah, man. I mean, this would be up there for me. I like it more than RE6 and RE5. It also, like, thinking about RE3, it brings back the decision making to some degree. It's not as expansive, but it brings that back to some degree to like the end of the game. Um I would go for Revelations 2. I would definitely go above Revelations 1. I think I would actually place this in the A tier. I would go above RE1, the remake, and right below Code Veronica, I believe. And just, once again, I'm not that it is just a, like, these are characters that I really like. I love Claire from RE2 and the return of Barry playing as Barry. Like, that's so fucking dope. And with Moira and like the story that they're telling there, and it's not fucking, I keep saying Sherry. It's not Sherry for, it's damn it, I am forgetting the name of what we can look it up. What the fuck is the name of that other character you can play as in co-op? Okay, there we go. Natalia is the character that you can play as in co-op in Revelations 2. Um so sure, yeah, that is definitely whenever you think of young girls in the Resident Evil universe, Sherry is going to always be that name that immediately pops up. Next up, we have Resident Evil 7 here to rank. And, you know, with Revelations 2, undeniably, that is the return to form for the franchise that the franchise really needed, but it didn't hit the mainstream popularity in the same way that RE7 did. And, the commercial success that RE7 had, that was undeniably what saved the franchise, got the franchise back on the right foot. And I think that just the characters in this game with the Baker family, Jack Baker in particular, one of the cooler stalker style designs. And it felt novel at the time. It felt fresh, coming before what we had with Mr. X in the remake and Nemesis in the remake, and then into Lady D, and now into whatever the hell the name of that character was in Resident Evil 9 at the opening there. But and I guess you have multiple stalkers throughout Resident Evil 9. But yeah, Resident Evil 7, I it's not necessarily a love-hate relationship with this game. There's things about Resident Evil 7 that I don't hear brought up a lot that I just really, really do not like at all, in terms of enemy design, with the mold being the primary enemy that you're facing throughout the game. That just, I get it that the Baker family, they're always looming, they're always a threat, and you're always having to contend with that. But for the majority of the shit you're shooting is the mold, and it's just not fun shit to shoot. I know that's a very primitive, fucking ape-brained complaint to have about this game, but it's just not fun killing those things. And the lack of variety with core enemies, and not having your zombies and not having your traditional style of enemies to take out. And I get it from storytelling perspective why they did that. And there's just, when you get to the ship section later on in the game, there's some pacing issues for sure. This opens up all time iconic first like 3 hours of this game are as good, if not better, than anything other than Resident Evil 4. But it dips off like a pretty hard dip after that opening, few hours or so. But yeah, I mean, I don't like the Winters family. I don't like Mia. I don't like Ethan. I don't really have that investment. I love the setting. I love the swampy bayou, Louisiana, Mississippi, that kind of feel. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that feel being brought into Resident Evil. I think we need to return to something like that in the future and have it be slightly more open and expansive. And like, I think that would be so damn dope to go back to an area like this in the future. But if I'm being completely real about Resident Evil 7, it's one of those games I just don't really ever have a strong desire of returning back to, because I know of the sections later in the game after that open. Like, I would love to just play the opening 3 hours over and over and over again, but everything past that is like, there's some, I will give it credit, there are some really really well designed puzzles in RE7. So yeah, some probably some of the best puzzles in franchise history in 7. So major props to 7 for that. Iconic location, great puzzles, the Baker family, really interesting, and it is scary. RE7 is genuinely scary, unlike a lot of the other Resident Evil games. So enough props to go around, but I want to bring up some of my criticisms, because I don't often hear people critique Resident Evil 7 too much. It feels like one of the I, what would the right term for this be? It feels like one of the favorites. You know what I mean? Like, one of the favorites in the family. And as we'll get into Village has started to feel like a bit of the black sheep per se, where I hear people shit on Resident Evil 8 a lot, and I'm like, dude, I like RE8 a whole hell of a lot more than RE7, but we'll get into that in a second. RE7 I would put it in the B tier. I would go above 0 without a doubt. I would go above 3 Remake without a doubt. I think I would also go above Revelations. Once again, just showing some love to the impact that that game had as well. Next up, we have Resident Evil 8 on the board, and I love this game. I think Resident Evil 8 is fantastic. I like it a whole hell of a lot more than Resident Evil 7. And maybe that is because I lean a little bit more action than, but I don't know if I really lean more over the top action than horror. I like a good balance of both. And I think Resident Evil 8 has a section in this game that the dollhouse section is scarier in RE8 than anything in RE7. Overall, as a game, for sure. I'll give you that. Resident Evil 7 is a scarier overall package. But if you're comparing like the peak in terms of the one moment that got you the most, for me, the dollhouse got me more than anything in RE7. And then when you're talking about werewolves that you're killing, and you're going up against vampires and these Frankenstein mutated creatures and shape-shifting entities, and you got all of this cool enemy design and such great level design with the Lady D's manor at the opening, and then going into the factory and the swamp section. It was just paced so well, and I had fun doing everything in this game that was to be done. Like, all of the boss fights I enjoy, and it's one of those titles where, like, I when I go back to it, I'm actually looking forward to the majority of the sequences in this game, because yeah, it doesn't have those significant drop-offs. I'll give you that the peak of the game probably is early on. But I don't even know if I would say that. Like, the Lady D stuff up top is dope. That boss fight is dope. The manor, god tier. But there's some shit later on in Resident Evil 8. Like, it gets a little bit silly. I'll give you that. But there's some shit later on in this game that is god tier, in my opinion. So, Village, I'm going to put Village up there, man. Village is up there for me. So I'm thinking, as I'm looking over this, it would definitely be in that A range for me personally. And yeah, I mean, the merchant in there, just this game is dope, man. This is a dope ass game. And also the environment design, like the location variety, the industrial feel, the gothic horror, a little bit of RE4 in there with a mix of RE7 in there. Just, yeah, man, fucking Village was dope, dude. People sleep on Village. Village is really, really fun. I will go Heisenberg was sick. I don't like the winter story at all, but it at least kind of came to a conclusion here. We'll give it points for ending. Okay. I will go above Resident Evil 1 Remake. I know people are going to kill me for that. Above Revelations 2. Above Code Veronica. Bro, you know, just if I'm being honest with myself, I would go above RE1, the original, and I would go above RE3, the original. I like Village a whole hell of a lot. Like, even as I'm sitting here just thinking about the game, I'm wanting to go back and replay it and just kill these fucking awesome enemies. Like, the enemy variety really sets this thing over the top. This is some of the best enemy variety in franchise history. All right, my people, but the time has come to rank Resident Evil 9. Where does it slot into the mix here? So listen, this is very fresh, and I have been known to be a prisoner of the moment in the past. I can really enjoy. I like things. I like liking things, and I know that on this in this era of internet discourse, content creation, it seems like people really get a thrill out of being miserable and hate clicks and just dooming and glooming and never being happy. I don't ever want to be that. I want to enjoy things. I go into things hoping that I enjoy them, and I'm bummed out if I don't, and then I'm thrilled if I do. And like, so sure, could there be a prisoner of the moment factor in play with Resident Evil 9? Sure. But dude, this game is so damn fun. So damn fun. It has its flaws. It has the most inherent flaw that no other game really has. It has like an inherent pacing issue that is unavoidable unless your favorite game in the franchise is RE7 and your second favorite game is RE4. Like, that's just almost unavoidable. You're either going to really prefer playing as Leon or really prefer playing as Grace. That's just almost a fact, I would say. They're very different tonally, structurally, level layout, gameplay styling. Like, they are so polar opposite. But at the same time, like, for someone like me, it just works really well, as I like both styles a lot. I really enjoy Resident Evil 7, the more true blue survival horror, exploration, puzzle solving, hoarding resources. I love that style because I grew up with that. But then on the other hand, Resident Evil 4 Remake, I think, is one of the most perfect gameplay loops ever created, and it's pretty much just more of that, except now I got a hatchet and I can pick up chainsaws off the ground, and it's just this big, explosive, nonstop, high-octane, action-packed fucking blockbuster when I'm playing as Leon. And not even to get into how much it leans into that, because we're going to keep all of these rankings as spoiler free as possible, but it goes there. It goes there. And it goes into directions that harken back to Resident Evil 6. And the spectacle that we were talking about earlier with Resident Evil 6, but appreciating the player and appreciating the lineage for real survival horror, keeping that intact while also providing you the spectacle. This is the highest production value in franchise history. It is the best story in franchise history. Like, Resident Evil 9 is a god tier video game. And as for a ranking, man, to place it on the board, I'm looking at it here. Of course, it's going to be shit, dude. So just some behind the scenes. Like, I don't script anything. I don't script any of my videos. I don't really even, I should probably take more notes and bullet points and shit like that, but I don't do a lot of that. I don't do any pre-planning or mock drafting or mock ranking. Like, I just come in here and rank it on the fly with you guys. So as I'm sitting here and I'm like, damn, it feels crazy for me to say this, but like, Resident Evil Requiem might be my fourth favorite Resident Evil game ever. Like, it doesn't feel right coming out of my mouth for whatever reason. And maybe it is like I'm overly aware that I'm probably being a prisoner of the moment, but I do think I came away from Requiem liking it more than the remake of 2. Is that crazy? It feels crazy. It feels like that shouldn't be possible where Resident Evil 2, the original, I guess spoilers, is just my favorite game of all time. I didn't want to lead with that at the beginning of the video because it's like, well, that destroys the purpose of watching the rest of the ranking. So I hate to hit y'all with a little bit of, bait and switch there. But for longtime viewers who have been around the channel, y'all obviously are well aware that Resident Evil 2, the original, is my favorite game of all time. So I hope I'm not being too deceptive there, but you don't want to put that up front at the video for anybody who's a newcomer, because I know sometimes these rankings can appeal to new eyeballs. But when you're talking about my favorite game of all time and a remake of that is so but it's very different. It's a very, very different style of game. It's drastically different, to the point where, if I'm being completely transparent with the audience, like, when I first played Resident Evil 2, the remake, I was a little bit disappointed because it was so different and it had none of the charm that the original had, in my opinion. Like, going for that pitch black, no lighting, like it just leaned all the way into horror. And Resident Evil always had that campy heart to it that backed everything. Like, that was the clear separation between something like Resident Evil and something like Silent Hill, where Silent Hill leaned all the way into the psychological horror and just the real vivid, deep horror. Like, the roots are so strong in Silent Hill, in terms of, like, that is the number one goal in that game, in that franchise, or early on in that franchise at least, is to scare the ever-loving shit out of you. Resident Evil was never that scary. Like, none of the games were really scary until you get to RE7. Probably was the first game that I would say was actually scary. Resident Evil 1 remake was fairly scary. Anywho, the hell am I saying at this point? But RE9, I will place it. Yeah. Dude, it feels so wild to place it above Resident Evil 2, the remake. Like, I feel that that's a crime against humanity for some reason, but I would place it above Resident Evil 2 remake. I think RE9 is my fourth favorite Resident Evil game of all time. So, yeah, there you have it. I mean, I guess that's a spoiler for the rest of the video as well. I'll quickly go ahead and rank the other games from this list that I've played, but if you were to exit off this video right now, you would get a full understanding of the ranking. So next up here we have Resident Evil Survivor, and this was a title on the PlayStation 1 that it was actually weird. So it's, as you see here, you're moving around. It's like a light gun game without a light gun. Or at least we didn't play it with a light gun when I was growing up. We had a light gun back on the PlayStation 1. So I assume we would have played it with the light gun if it had light gun capabilities, but it is essentially a light gun game. It's like a first person shooter of sorts that feels like a light gun game. Not anything special whatsoever with Survivor here. We'll talk about another game similar to this that I like a whole hell of a lot more than Survivor, but Survivor, nothing special. So in terms of its ranking, I would probably go, I would definitely go, I don't know if I would say D tier. It probably is a D tier game, although it does, I'm a sucker for choice. It does have choices, nothing crazy, like nothing narrative, but you can choose different directions to go, which door to go into, or which path to take, shit like that in Survivor. But yeah, it's probably a D tier game, but at the same time, it's not a bad D tier game. And then is this Resident Evil Survivor 2? Code Veronica. I don't think I've ever played that. Huh. So we'll skip that one. And then we have Dead Aim. Okay, so here's the other one that I wanted to talk about. This is another light gun game. And it's interesting because Survivor to me feels more like an actual light gun game, but I don't remember playing it with a light gun. And then Dead Aim feels like a genuine first person shooter. And then I'll pull up some gameplay. You're exploring in third person. Okay, here we go. I know this is very old, grainy footage here, but it'll work. Dead Aim was alright, man. It was okay, and yeah, that's the weird thing where Dead Aim actually did have like you could use a light gun while playing it, and it was okay. The main character is obviously a bit of a Leon ripoff, full stop. But he had a little bit of he was kind of a dope main character, and the villain was kind of sick. I can't, if I'm being completely transparent with you guys, it's not like I can sit here and I don't remember the name of the main character, so maybe he wasn't all that memorable. But Dead Aim wasn't bad, man. Dead Aim wasn't bad. I would place it. It would definitely be above Survivor. I'll put it at the bottom of the C tier. It would be quite a bit above Survivor. It's not one, once again, I'm not recommending people to go out, and I'm sure that game has gone up in value quite a bit. I'm not recommending people to go out and break the bank to play fucking Dead Aim, but watch a YouTube playthrough of that. It's maybe 3 hours, something like that. It is a very, very short game. Next up, we have Outbreak File 1 and File 2, and I think that's it. Yeah, I haven't played any of these other titles on here, so Outbreak File 1 and File 2 will be the final games for the ranking. In my opinion, Outbreak is, I'm just way ahead of its time. It just came out too damn early. I think if this would have, even 10 years later, even 5 years later, really, it came out in 2003. So 5 years later, you're talking about '08. Yeah, I mean, yeah, at this time, online multiplayer was feasible without the input delay, without the lag, without the any of the latency issues, at least not to this degree that you got back on the PlayStation 2. But yeah, Outbreak was essentially a full blown, like a legitimate survival horror game where you're picking different characters and they're all unique characters and they have their own unique abilities. And Outbreak was so fucking dope. And I hope that they return to this. Like there's some rough edges about Outbreak, undeniably, but I hope they return to this format because we're kind of running out of remakes at this point. After we get to RE, well, shit. Okay, we got Code Veronica coming up in 27, and then that'll just be the only thing left to remake would be 5 and 6 if they even want to do that. I assume they're going to do 5, but we'd kind of be running out of remakes. I'd be so down to see a remake of this, or just a new game, creating 4 new characters and trying to, because I mean, if you look at Grace with Alyssa, her mom comes from Outbreak, so they're still pulling from this lore. I think they should go back to it at some point, opposed to doing like the Resident Evil Resistance and RE-verse and all this shit. Like, make a true blue survival horror co-op game, and you can lean into the action a little bit more. Like, you don't have to go back to this exact style of tank base. I'm not saying anything like that. Of course, you're going to go a little bit more modernized and all of that, but like a true Resident Evil 2 but co-op would be so sick. You know what I mean? Like that blend of action and horror from RE2 Remake carrying over to an Outbreak remake or reboot, or just a new entry, Outbreak File 3, 20 something years later. But listen, this wouldn't be up there. I wouldn't put this, I'd put it above 6 in the B tier, but I don't think I would put it above 0. And same goes for File 2. If I'm being completely real, with Outbreak File 1 and File 2, a lot of it kind of blends together in my brain. Like, I remember File 2, I think, had the zoo section in that game, and there was like a fucking elephant, like a mutated elephant or some shit in Outbreak File 2. But a lot of Outbreak File 1 and File 2 blend together in my head. So I'll just place File 2 below it, but that's... if I'm being completely real with you guys, that's just from lack of memory. And honestly, dude, like I wouldn't even need a full blown remake wouldn't even be necessary. I would be down to just go back to these if they were put into like the PlayStation Plus Classics catalog, or how Capcom has been doing it lately, where you can go in and buy these games for like $9.99. I'd be so down to. There's the elephant. I'd be so down. Oh yeah, and it's Raccoon City as well. You do return to the RPD. Um, some of this shit is starting to come back to me. I don't know if I ever finished Outbreak File 2. So, yeah, I would love to revisit this, to return to this, because my memory is very, very shaky on all of it. But it's at the very least something that I just appreciate. I have that level of appreciation for it where if it was brought back, like I'd be there day one to support it, because I think a return to this series is probably necessary. Like one of the you probably a Revelations 3 in the mix, have somebody's campaign that you're focused on for Revelations 3, maybe a Ada standalone campaign. But after that, after you're all out of remakes, you're probably going to have to go back to something like Outbreak. And I think that would be smart in today's day and age. I think that would do really, really damn well. But yeah, man, shout out to the old Residents of Evil. This is my official ranking. I guess we'll go through and do like a top 10 sound off here. RE2, the OG, is my favorite Resident Evil game of all time. In at number 2 is RE4, the remake. Number 3, RE4, the OG. 4, Resident Evil 9. 5, Resident Evil 2 remake. 6, Village. 7, RE3 OG, 8 RE1 OG, 9 Code Veronica, and 10 Resident Evil 1 Remake. That's probably not a top 10 list that you see too often in terms of the Resident Evil ranking. But once again, keep in mind, I'm not trying to do an objective ranking. This is just purely based on personal preference, and this is how my personal preference shakes out. And I can see I lean a little bit more towards the action side of things, I would say, with RE3 ranking so high, RE4 ranking so high, Village, 9 is pretty action packed. So I lean a little bit more towards the action side of things with Resident Evil. But I am curious to hear all of your comments down below. Hit me up. Let me know your personal ranking for the franchise. Once again, keep in mind it's subjective, and that's what I want to read as well. Like when I'm going through the comments, I want to hear people who have played the games and have their own unique takes. It would be so boring if we all shared the exact same opinion. I always get that always confuses me on the internet, why people are upset at other people for sharing their opinion whenever you could. Like, I'm as kind as can be. Just drop your opinion of your personal ranking and we'll talk about it. We'll shoot the shit. We can debate it, but no need to get mad at someone else's opinion. So these are my opinions. I'm already in advance putting the shield up. But sound off away. I don't mind. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the video, and I shall see you good people in the next episode. If you do want to support on Patreon, become a YouTube member, all of that is linked in the description down below. I do an exclusive podcast or video episode for Patreon supporters and YouTube members, and also every week or so, like every 10-ish days, I try to get it up every week, but sometimes I fail. But very frequently, I post a poll allowing YouTube members and Patreon supporters to vote on the videos I create. So head on over there if any of that is of interest to you. And yeah, man, appreciate y'all for tuning in. Don't want to take up any more of your time. It's already been an hour and 13 minutes. Goodness gracious. I apologize, guys. Appreciate y'all. And I'll see you good people in the next episode. Goodbye.